Welcome back to Locked On Chiefs. The first day of padded practice happened as in the books, and Matt Derrick is here to tell us all about it. I hope that you guys are going to enjoy this. We'll talk about who was out there, who wasn't, what the result was, and where it's going from here. Welcome to Locked On Chiefs.
It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Matt Derrick is back. How are you, Matt?
I'm doing pretty well, Ryan. How about yourself?
Did you get a little break in the weather out there in St. Joe?
It has been 2 pretty nice days the last couple of days. I went outside this morning. It's 63 degrees. Think it got up into maybe the middle high 70s this morning. Because this was the longest practice yet. First padded practice. They went a little bit longer than they'd gone the last couple of days. So we might have gotten up to 78 today. Who knows? Wow. But yeah, complete break from last week. I know the players are enjoying it, and certainly us media lazy fatties are certainly enjoying it.
Pretty good for August 3rd. I mean, that's pretty incredible. 78 degrees. I hope that it keeps up for you. It's another week or so since I'm going to be there. We'll see what happens then. But lot going on. Hopefully it makes your job a little bit easier. Like you said, a longer practice. But today was the pads were on. Some thud, right? But we're not talking full go to the ground or anything like that.
Not quite. No, I mean, going to the ground, not technically permissible, but going to the ground happens on occasion. Right. But there were some pops today. There were some good sounds. Some interesting guys made some sounds with their hitting and everything. So it was definitely a different atmosphere at practice today for sure.
We're going to get into it, and hopefully I won't forget anyone, but if so, that's what the wrap-up segment's for. In the meantime, I think everybody kind of held their breath a little bit this morning. We got a little information from Andy, but what is your take on Tyreek Hill tendonitis, is it?
Yeah, that's what the report was. Wasn't something that had been bothering him before. Just popped up this morning. He came out very early, was among the first arrivals out on the practice field, then headed back to the locker room, then came back late. It was one of the last arrivals, just before the re-arrivals in that case, just before practice started. Took part in the stretch period, and then went over to it didn't go over to the medical tent, but went over to the strength and conditioning tent, took off his pads, did some weightlifting, mostly upper body, doing some curls, that kind of thing. And then headed out after about 40 minutes on the practice field. So sense is that it's not serious. Nobody seems to be too concerned about this. Just a little sore knee that pops up from maybe a little overuse now and then. I think, hey, if we get a couple of days from now and he's not practicing and it still bothers him, then that's when to be concerned. But at this point, nobody in St. Joe seems terribly alarmed.
Okay. And that was my take as well. And for folks who don't know, tendonitis is generally an inflammation of a tendon. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a broad-based injury. And it does come and go. So I hate to say it, but day-to-day is probably the best way to put it, right?
You hate to use the word day-to-day.
I know.
And nobody used day-to-day today, but I'm sure we'll hear day-to-day at some point.
Andy seemed pretty comfortable with it. He also, I thought, had a positive comment on Juan Thornhill. It's tough to read into these quick, short answers about where somebody's at, but just your general feeling about where that injury is and whether we should be starting to get concerned as time goes on.
Yeah, Thornhill, Chad Williams too, were both the guys that left with groin injuries on Monday at this point. I can't remember what days of the week they are during training camp. Come on, you know that.
Say -2.
Yeah. But no, I mean, neither one of them seemed too serious. Both those guys walked up on their own up the hill back to the locker room, which is always a good sign. Thornhill, both those guys were on the practice field today. We're not taking part in any of the workouts, but, we're definitely observers. Once again, yeah, I mean, no, it doesn't seem to be any terrible concern. Really, the only thing with Thornhill is it's just another slowdown. I mean, the Chiefs have been really careful with him, trying to ramp him up slowly through the offseason. Even during camp, I mean, really kind of measuring his workload a little bit, having him run with the 2s and mixing him with the 1s on occasion. So yeah, they were trying their best to ramp him up to get him going at full speed. And now there's another slowdown. So I think at this point, it's just more worry and frustration about that aspect of it, not about the groin specifically.
Okay. Well, and that's, I can see that because there's time there's not that much time. You need to get some of this work done before the season rolls around. So I'm with you there. In what the reaction was to Tyreek Hill not being out there, who do you think made the most of their day in the wide receiver group?
It was interesting. I mean, we got a few new guys getting some reps in there, and they kind of spread them out a little bit. But definitely the guy who definitely, got the biggest boost out of it was Marcus Kemp. I mean, there were 2 team periods. One was a 7-minute down by 2 scores. Offense needs to come down and score quickly period. And that finished with a long touchdown from Mahomes to Kemp on kind of a post route. And then I think it was a little bit of a crosser on the second one. Another one. It was another great throw. That was a 2-minute period in the second team period. But not just another perfect throw to Kemp. He holds it down. So the one's got 2 touchdowns today. Both of them were Mahomes to Kemp. But there were some interesting guys. I mean, Reese Fountain was a guy who got a couple of reps with the ones. I mean, Cornell Powell's getting in there. There's usual suspects, the Gary Dieters and Antonio Callaway is mixing in there as well. So the prospects for that, whether it's 5 or 6 wide receivers, there's still a lot of names in the mix.
I took that report on Kemp as being, hey, don't forget about me.
Don't forget about Marcus Kemp, Ben. Do not sleep on Marcus Kemp.
He might have been directing that at me even. Sorry, Marcus. We'll make sure to include you in that. And, there's a lot going on the offense and a lot I really want to know specifics about. I think we'll get into that after we tell you about our friends over there at betonline.ag. And BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to make all your sports action bets. Baseball season through the roof, NBA, NHL, obviously football, even UFC and MMA. Before the next contest, go to BetOnline on your laptop or your mobile device and check out all the sporting news, the odds, the bonuses, everything you need to place your action. Don't sit on the sidelines anymore. It's your chance to get in the game as teams prep for their runs at playoffs or even a brand new season. Head over to the website, use your device, and check it out today. You'll receive a 50% bonus on your deposit. That's 50% on top of what you deposit at betonline.ag, your online sportsbook experts, and use the promo code LOCKEDON. Let them know that we sent you over there. So, Matt, thud is a great thing, and I know there was good sound out there. I can imagine where most of it came from, but for me, the prime thing that I wanted to see is how the rookies did today. Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, and Lucas Niang. Let's start inside. How did you feel the day overall was for him?
All 3 of the rookies, honestly, performed really, really well. Creed Humphrey, his first reps in the one-on-ones against Derek Nottie, he won those pretty handily. And, it was really good hand placement. It was a very technically sound block. He struggled a little bit on the second reps, but, it was definitely first time out was great. Trey Smith, same. He was a little bit more, I think, power than technically sound, but was really effective. Niang has struggled at times. He's been filling in for Mike Remmers with him out, and he's had some up and down moments. He has struggled a little bit. But so far at this point, as Andy Reid would tell you and say, not everything's perfect. But Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith on the inside have both looked really good so far.
Did we see more of the evolution of the run blocking scheme here today?
A little bit. I'm still trying to get a really good firm grasp for, what they are doing. But I think you're seeing them trying to get a little bit more power into that run game. We saw a lot of run between the tackles today. Not saying that there wasn't some of the outside stuff. I know McCole Hardman had one on an end around. They did a few things, but there was a lot of, just trying to pound it between the tackles. Maybe there's just a little bit of shaking the cobwebs off too and get everybody a chance to get some hits. But, you talk about thuds. Nick Bolton had a couple of good thuds. Willie Gay had some good thuds. Really interesting one. Elijah McGuire, running back, coming up the middle, and Dorian O'Daniel. Had it been a full to-the-ground practice, I think he might have popped him into another stratosphere because that was probably the loudest hit of the day. Wow. Between that and of all people, Noah Gray with a nice little block at one point. Those were a couple of good little pops that kind of surprised me.
That's nice to hear. I was going to ask you, I know McGuire's trying to make the most of the advantage he has right now with Darwin Thompson out. That certainly makes sense to me. I also heard some folks say that Darryl was looking pretty good running between that power stuff as well. Who do you think looked the best out there in the running back crew?
Yeah, I mean, today I thought Darrell Williams looked really good. I mean,
Yeah.
he seems to, I think, of the group, probably the best suited for maybe some of the straight power stuff. Clyde had a great cutback at one point too, so he's definitely got that ability. But Darrell had a couple of really nice runs. Yeah, Elijah McGuire's trying to take advantage of that. I'll tell you what, I mean, of the young guys that trying to take advantage of Darwin Thompson not being out there. Might be Derek Gore. I think that he's even been most impressive. I still think it's a long shot battle for a couple of those guys, maybe even Thompson, because it might just be a numbers game. Yeah. But there's I would say at this point, probably a pretty big line between Jerick McKinnon rather, and who's going to be the number 4.
Okay. But Gore can scoot from what I understand.
Yeah.
Right?
He can. He's got some good movement. He's had some good hands. I mean, he's shown a lot since being there at the rookie mini camp, and I've always been really impressed with him as in the passing game. It's what we've seen a lot of early on. But yeah, he gets to give the chance to run the football a little bit here. He's looked good at that too.
Okay. I postulated this morning on the early video on RGR just about what the effect was of those young guys on the line going up against Jerry Reed in particular, and what he's able to give them in terms of a new look, a real look at what they're going to face come week 1. In particular, reps with Reed. Anybody stand out to you that were able to weather that storm better than others?
Yeah, I probably need a little bit more to see before I can start measuring some of the that kind of thing. I mean, some of the bigger matchups have been a little bit easier to identify, especially out on the edges. The stuff in the middle has been a little bit more difficult. I mean, today was the first day that we really got to see some of the like 9-on-7 drills and some of the other things specifically that kind of centered a little bit more about the run game and up the middle. But you asked the question of what brings to mind, frankly, is Chris Jones, because Chris Jones has dominated anywhere he's been on the field, right, left, outside, middle. There's no doubt. I mean, Chris Jones has been the best defensive lineman in this camp by far. And if there's been any questions about whether he could handle the move to the outside and that would affect him on the inside too, the answer is no. I mean, he has just flat out been the best all around defensive lineman out there by far. Okay.
So no longer a question. I understand that Lucas Niang is coming into his own. He had a bit of a rough day, though. Would you say that in observing that, is it more about power? Is it more about moves? Is it just being raw at this point for Niang?
I think it's probably just being raw at this point. I mean, remember, this is a guy that, because of the injury, really hasn't had meaningful snaps in certainly over a year and a half, if not almost really pushing 18 months. I mean, you got to go really, I think, even to October, November of, his last year in college. I mean, it's been that long. So you see, I think the athleticism's there. I mean, I think you see the technique, it's all there. It's just getting used to things. And you know what? I mean, you're a rookie that hasn't really, like I said, seen meaningful snaps in 19, 20 months, and you're going up against Chris Jones. Yeah, that's not going to be a favorable matchup for you. So he's going to have some growing pains, and there's going to be some up and down moments. I think, it's a lot. Maybe it's too much of a generalization to make after a couple of days, but I think we've seen why that the Chiefs would like to have Mike Remmers win that job, because I do think that Niang just needs a little bit more seasoning, and they're giving it to him. I mean, he's getting a lot of snaps. He's been working on the left side and then on the right side. They're not afraid to throw him in there, but I think you're just seeing there's a little ways to go for him.
Yeah, I hope that Remmers gets back as well. And I do find that sometimes that initial throw into the fire can really be troublesome, but they can learn a lot from it. Maybe it takes a week or two or even longer than that out of the fire to really absorb it all and be able to put it back into your game. So I hope that happens as well. But he's not alone. It wasn't the greatest day for Orlando Brown against Chris Jones either, was it?
No, it was not. I mean, that's another. It's just a bad matchup. I mean, you're Orlando Brown, and the first thing you got to do go out there and face is Chris Jones. I mean, Chris Jones been manhandling everybody. So maybe if he draws an easier assignment, maybe he would have fared a little better there. But yeah, I mean, hey, that's probably something that's a little bit of a matchup disadvantage in a one-on-one situation. I mean, Chris Jones is going to win a lot of one-on-one matchups, so I don't know if there's a reason to be too worried. But at the same time, I mean, Jones is also the kind of rusher that has given Orlando Brown a little bit of trouble in the past. I mean, he's got some things to still work on. I think that overall we've seen him hold up pretty well when he's been going up against Frank Clark a lot. He's been seeing some other guys, in drills. I mean, so we haven't seen any big issues with Orlando Brown, but yeah, that was just a bad start for him today in the one-on-ones.
So this isn't a transition to the offense thing. This is just that Chris is a pain to have to go against.
Yeah, and wherever he lined that. I mean, you're seeing exactly why the Chiefs' philosophy is we're going to put Chris Jones wherever we think he can wreck the most damage, because in this camp he's been doing exactly that, just wrecking damage wherever he lines up.
And I like to hear that. I want to know a little bit more about the backside of that matchup, what's going on in the rest of the defense. We'll get to that after we tell you about the best protein bar on the market in Built Bar. One thing you have to know that we're going to tell you about is Built Bar, because they are the best tasting protein bars ever. And it doesn't matter what your favorite flavor is, whether it's coconut brownie chunk or maybe the new grasshopper, the mint. It's incredible. And I even like, this is my new favorite, the toffee almond. All of these have things in common, including 17 grams of protein, only 130 to 150 calories, depending on the flavor. There's all kinds of amazing flavors that keep circulating, and lots of special limited editions that you have to go to the website to check out. You can get that mint brownie or the raspberry or any of these whenever you go over to builtbar.com. When you do, use the LOCKED15 code and you'll get 50% off of your first order. That's the promo code LOCKED15 at builtbar.com. So we led into that a little bit slick there. Sorry, I got a little ahead of myself, but the pass rush is one thing. I saw a couple of reps from Turk Wharton. I thought they looked pretty good as well. Really happy to see that. I guess he's doing Pilates, according to him. Little Chris Jones rubbing it off on him. That's great. I mean, Derek Doughty is not a pass rush demon, but a solid guy in there. Should I take away that Doughty looks like his normal self, not that he's regressed in any way?
Yeah, I think it's his normal self. I mean, if anything, I mean, the fact that Creed Humphrey kind of handled him a little bit there in those one-on-ones, I think is probably a bigger compliment to Creed Humphrey than it is a knock against Derek Doughty. I mean, and you're talking about the defensive line. I'll tell you what, one guy who had a really good rep was Colin Saunders. They weren't all perfect. I mean, he had his second round of one-on-ones was a little bit rougher, but he absolutely, and I don't have my notes in front of me. I can't remember who it was. He just absolutely blew by his guy on his first snap in one-on-ones. It was a nice first step. The only thing with Doughty had like 2 false starts in a row on one-on-one. So I don't know if I'm going to read too much into that, but maybe that was just a little bit in his head of his earlier matchup with Humphrey, and he was just trying to get that quick first step.
Well, I'm glad to hear both those things, actually. Saunders is a big man, but he's still got a little bit of athleticism out there that might be applicable. I'm looking forward to that. Linebackers seem to have a decent day out. Another pick for Nick Bolton, right? Looked like they were moving some new guys into the first line defense there. I think Harris got some reps, right? Anything that stood out to you?
Yeah, they've with Neiman and Hitchens being out, and Hitchens did get a little bit of teamwork today. But that has been met, that green dot calling the play has been kind of circling around a little bit. But honestly, the guy who's gotten the most work the last couple of practices with those guys out has been Darius Harris. Mm-hmm. Is he the number 3 Mike at this point? Maybe he's probably the best equipped to be that number 3 at this point because he's had some experience. He's been around the system for a little bit. But Nick Bolton, has looked everything that the Chiefs were hoping for as far as that draft pick goes. I mean, I still preach, hey, be patient with this because the Chiefs are grooming him for a bigger role. They're not grooming him to be an outside guy. That's not what they're hoping him to be. They're hoping that he's going to be the next Mike Linebacker for this team and take over for Anthony Hitchens. And that means more responsibilities and more duties. But at this point, you look at where Willie Gay was at this point in his development last year and with no OTAs, and where Nick Bolton is, remember, with all of his college experience, he is further along. Oh, yeah. But that doesn't mean that it's going to, result in immediate playing time. I mean, I think he's going to get his snaps, but it's going to. This is to the Chiefs. Nick Bolton is all about 22. If what they get in 21, I think is gravy. It's a bonus. They just want to make sure, I think, in week 1, 2022, that Nick Bolton is their guy.
Well, the way that Hitch and Neiman are going, I think they're going to get some bonus out of that. So good for them. Would you go so far as to say that Harris is the number 5 linebacker on this roster right now?
Yeah, they really do seem comfortable with Darius Harris. And honestly, with, all 3 of those young guys, with Willie Gay, Darius Harris, and Nick Bolton, all 3 of them have comfortably moved around from position to position. I mean, Hasn't been locking one guy into one spot, and all three of them have looked, pretty good at positions and places. Remember, Harris was, a kind of a sign and stash undrafted free agent guy because he was injured coming out of college. But the Chiefs were really, really high on him, and you see that exactly why. I mean, I think he's starting to come into his own a little bit, and if that's the core nucleus of your linebacker group going into next year, I mean, right now, if that's the case, I think you'd have to be pretty optimistic as a Chiefs fan because all three of those guys have looked good.
Yeah, that's great news. Does this mean that Dorian Daniel's in trouble here at the moment?
Possible. I mean, the Chiefs kind of, went light on linebacker last year, really just because they just didn't have a whole lot of depth. This year, I think that's a different case. I mean, I would think at this point, 5 linebackers being kept is bare minimum, whereas, they went with 4 times last year.
Right.
Is there room for 6? Especially with it looking like maybe they're going to keep 5 safeties and, how deep will they go at corner? 10 defensive linemen. I mean, we start talking about keeping one extra guy at every spot, and you don't have a 60-man roster. So there's going to be some tough decisions. And honestly, I think there's going to be tougher decisions on this roster getting down to 53 than we have seen in a few years.
That's really intriguing, especially when you mentioned the safety play. Could they keep 5? It all comes down to teams, right? But the Thornhill injury, I think, is the catalyst for all of that. Because if you don't have any worry about Juan Thornhill missing time, it seems pretty clear cut. But today they had to replace him. Looked like Devin Key, the rookie, got a lot of snaps. How did he look to you?
Yeah, hey, up and down moments. I mean, getting his first taste with the ones, I thought he made a couple of good plays. He kind of got beat in a couple of spots too, and that was his really first chance to, against that first line unit as a dime safety today. But this is a guy going back even to rookie minicamp has taken everything that's been given to him and excelled so far. I've been impressed with him since the beginning of May. So Devin Key, to a degree, is not coming anywhere out of nowhere. I mean, he's been there the entire time fighting along, and he's been running those number 2s with Will Parks, with Armani Watts kind of still working his way in. So yeah, you're talking about a veteran like Parks. You've got now a guy like Key with a ton of upside. Watts has been your special teams guy. You want Thornhill in there. 6 guys aren't going to make it, and maybe not even 5. I mean, maybe they do get into 4, but so that's going to be another really competitive position because those guys are making it 1.
Well, and that brings me to the rest of the defensive backfield. Keeping more than 10 is problematic. So if you're going to keep 5, that means you're only going to keep 5 corners. I find that hard to swallow with this particular unit. Do you think that's a possibility?
It's a possibility. I mean, once again, I mean, the position's going to have to give at some point. But Traverse Ward, L'Jarius Sneed, Rashad Fenton, obviously there. I mean, at this point, Mike Hughes is getting the most looks, at corner, but DeAndre Baker certainly in the mix there too. And we haven't even gotten to BoPete yet, and we're already at 5.
Right.
So, and there's some other guys too, I think that, could certainly be in the competition, maybe a little bit further back. But yeah, that's a dividing line. I mean, there's going to be a name that Chiefs fans are familiar with that's going to get on the waiver wire. I think they'd love to keep some of those guys in the practice squad, but yeah, I mean, even at keeping 10 defensive backs, there's going to be some talent out there, barring injuries.
That's really intriguing to me. Anybody that stands out between Bootle, Zane Anderson, or any of the other guys that are really striving to make sure they get a practice squad spot?
I think Dicaprio Bootle has probably been the biggest one that's just been flashing a little bit. Seems like he's really, a tenacious player, always seems to be around the football. He's had a couple of pass blocks here and there. All those guys have been, there have been mistakes. I mean, that's what you see at that point, but that level. Bootle's probably been the most impressive to me at that point after Key. I mean, Key is kind of on another point. I mean, I think he's got a really good chance of the 53. I'm not sure if anybody else in the secondary does, but there's a handful of guys, and Bootle's probably at the top of that list of guys who I think will stick around on the practice squad.
Okay. Well, that's a lot of information, and I thank you for sharing it. It's just day 1. We have 3 more days of pads, and then they'd get a little bit of a break, yes?
Yep, we got 3 more days. Friday, last day of the pads, and it's going to be back into the 80s, maybe 90 on Friday. Right. And then to get the day off on Saturday. So, yeah.
Okay. Enjoy it while you got it. Stay cool out there, Matt. Thanks for spending the time and catching us up.
Absolutely, Ryan. Always great talking to you, my friend.
Folks, you guys have a great day. Thanks for listening to us today. We'll be back with more tomorrow. Talk to you then.